You really like the Prodigal Son story, right?
Yeah.
You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. If I don't know if everyone hearing this is familiar with the story, but it begins with a father and two sons who ran some kind of a farm or a ranch. And the normal procedure in a family in those days was that the sons would receive part of the inheritance when the father died, and usually the older son would get the majority of it and would become the head of the family at that. But in this story, the younger son appeared to get tired of living on the farm, and he wanted to enjoy life. He didn't like working on his farm, so he just told his father, "Why don't you just give me my share of the inheritance now, and I'm going to leave." Well, apparently there was no argument about it. The father gave him his share of the inheritance, and the son left. And when he left, he was quite wealthy because apparently the inheritance was pretty big. And so the young son went off to a distant place and began living a very, very lavish lifestyle. That's where the name prodigal means prodigious, one who just gives a lot. And I'm sure that when he went to the big city, wherever he went, he began spending money and buying the drinks for everybody in the house and inviting everybody to parties and having a lot of fun. And so it wasn't long, he had a lot of friends. And they loved to come around him because he would treat them all very well. But no matter how much money you have, if you keep spending it all, it will sometime be gone. And before long, his money was gone. And as it was gone, wherever he was staying, they threw him out of there, and his friends left him. And before long, I can picture him selling his cowboy boots and his horse and his saddle and his best clothes to try to just buy food, and finally down to just rags, no food, no money, no friends, no home, no nothing. And so he left the big city because there was no way to live there, found himself finding a work at some pig farm, feeding the pigs. Now, Hebrews do not eat pork, so this would have been probably not only a lowly job, but one involving things that he can't even put his own confidence in, or knowing that what he's even doing is not what he should be doing. And it appears that he had to live with the pigs in the pigs' pens and probably ate what the pigs were eating or what the pigs would not eat. And it wasn't very long at that till he finally realized this life is absolutely hopeless. So he began to rethink what he had done and thinking about his father and the ranch back home. And he began to put together what I call a theological statement about who his father was. He said, "My father's a rich man," and that's very true. "And my father has many servants," and that's very true. "And my father treats his servants very well," and that's true. Then he said something that was not true. He said, "Maybe if I go home, my father will let me be one of his servants." And that was not true. It could never be true, because even though he had wasted all the inheritance and insulted his father's name and degraded everything that was right about his old family line, the father never stopped loving him and wanting him. So finally the son came to this conclusion. He made one statement that was absolutely the best statement he'd ever made in his life. He said, "I will go back to my father." And the words, "I will," were so important, because now, for once in his life, his will was to return to the Father. So he started on his way home. And we don't know how far it was, but it does say it was a far country, so he had a long, long walk ahead of him. And you can be sure that walk was filled with hardships and all kinds of things that would have slowed him down or would have caused him to become discouraged. But he continued going on toward home. But a thought began to come to his mind that was kind of frightening. In those days, an incorrigible son could be stoned to death. So his father legally could kill him for what he had done. And so as he went home, he thought about that one. And his best thought was, beginning with the words, perhaps. Perhaps my father will let me be one of his servants. The word perhaps doesn't have any guarantee come with it. The word perhaps means the same as maybe so, maybe not. He'd had no way to know for sure, but that was his highest hope, that maybe he could become one of his father's servants. Well, he kept going, and as he came closer and closer to home, I can picture him becoming more and more afraid. My father might not accept me as a servant. If he won't take me as a servant, the other option is death. And so I can picture him coming toward his home, walking slower and slower and more afraid and not knowing what to expect for sure, but knowing he had no other option. In the meantime, the father had longed for the son to come back, and every day the father would go out and look down the road hoping to see the son. Now when the son left home earlier, he had looked fine. He wore the best clothes, well-groomed, a very nice-looking, successful-looking young man. But now as he comes home, he's a rag. He's dirty, he's filthy. He's spent his last few days feeding pigs and living in a mud pen. Long, scraggly hair, dirty, contempt, ugly. If we'd been there, we would not have recognized him. He would not look at all like he did when he left. But love has a way of reaching underneath the surface to the heart. And when the father looked down the road and saw him coming way off in the distance, immediately he knew, that is my son. The son was staggering along the road very slowly, frightened and not sure what to expect. So the father jumped up from his place and ran to meet the son. My question is, who came to who? The father came to the son. Now, the son had been practicing a speech all the way home. And if you've ever had to confront some very bad issue that you don't want to have to face, you keep thinking, what will I say when I get there? And you practice what you're going to say. And so the son had been practicing his speech all the way home. He said, when I see my father, I'll tell him, I'm not worthy to be your son anymore. Please let me be one of your servants. Well, when the father finally came to him, the father embraced him and the son began his speech. My father, I am not worthy. And at that, the father just said, enough, I don't want to hear that. And he told one of the servants, go get a dinner ready. We're going to have a party. We're going to celebrate because my son who was lost and is dead has come home. And the love of the father welcomed the son home and said, I'm not concerned about what you did. The only thing that matters to me is that you're back. And that's the picture for us, the love of the Father for us. When we make this simple decision, I will go back to the Father, then everything opens up doors that brings the love of the Father into our life, restores us into wonderful fellowship, and makes our life become worthwhile again. And the forgiveness of the Father, not even considering the loss. The father didn't think for 1 second about the loss of the inheritance or the cost or anything. The only thing that the father wanted was that son that he loved.
You having fun yet?
Yeah, we are.